Can I try to share the just sharing of the presentation? Hopefully, it will run. Yep. Can I try to share the?
Perfect.
Okay.
I don't know if Professor Al-Hidabi and Professor Sheu will be present.
I'm not sure, but they're supposed to be, if I'm not mistaken. They're supposed
normally,
to be.
so we must wait a bit. I present you Professor Benedetto Gui, who is our Professor of Economy.
Yeah, pleased to be here.
Yeah, pleasure also to meet you as well. Dr. Fatmir joined. I think he's in already.
Okay. Maybe.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi
Salam.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Benny?
I'm fine, thank you. We are fine. We have a small delegation here in the room, and then some other people link it.
Yeah, we're waiting now. It is. We have informed our students to join as well.
Okay.
It is raining here in Malaysia outside.
Raining? Oh.
Yeah.
It's always raining, Fatmir. It's
I was outside.
Here we are entering definitely in the autumn. It's a very gray sky, but not cold.
Not cold.
No.
It's supposed to be cold now. I'm in the freezer.
The time I came to Italy was in September. The weather was actually very beautiful. In fact, at this time, it was excellent.
Also, October has a good reputation in Italy. Professor Polisi could confirm that. Sicily is always a beautiful place.
No, Sicily is quite well known of the environment, actually, and if I'm not mistaken, I've been reading about few issues in Sicily, like, for example, most of the people who live very long in Italy are majority in Sicily, and due to the environment and the weather. So it is an ecological experiment, in fact.
Exactly. It's one of those blue zones.
Blue zones, yeah. That's a blue zone.
But Professor Polisi went to London, so in the fog, how do you say it? In the
in the fog
smog of London.
Yeah, no, it's not much smog very much, but it's more fog at the moment. Yeah, I normally live in London, but I'm in Sicily at the moment. Yeah.
It's a big difference between the two places.
Very big difference, yeah. From deep south to deep north. Yeah.
Okay, the platform is functioning. I think we should wait to Professor Al-Hidabi or Professor Sheu. What do you think?
I think you can proceed. No problem. You can
proceed.
Yeah, you can proceed with the program.
Okay. Good.
We have informed that now the students that we have informed, they are joining us. But this is like the end of the first class. They will join the second class. So that is a bit late, but they'll join now.
Okay, good. So then I repeat my welcome to all of you from Malaysia and Sophia University Institute. I present myself. My name is Bernard Calabout. I'm full professor of sociology and Christian social ethics here in our small university. I'm part from the beginning of the foundation of Sophia. We started 15 years ago with master programs, a doctoral school, and postdoctoral programs. We have a strong interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary approach. We have mainly classes in religion, politics, economics, social science, pedagogy, peace studies. And we are strongly committed to this, I said already, interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary approach. And we are convinced that religion today has important inputs to offer to the academic world. Sophia now is expanding in Africa and in Latin America. We are waiting to establish a bridge to Asia. There was a text that inspired me that you know for maybe all better than I, the document on human fraternity for world peace and living together from Abu Dhabi in February 2019, signed by Pope Francis and Great Imam Al-Tayeb from Cairo, Al-Azhar. I just quote, "Faith leads a believer to see in the other a brother or sister, to be supported and loved. Through faith in God, who has created the universe, creatures, and all human beings, equal on account of his mercy, believers are called, are called to express this human fraternity by safeguarding creation and the entire universe and supporting all persons, especially the poorest and those most in need." There, this quote of this very interesting document. I thought this is describing, I think, very well the atmosphere of our first contacts a few years ago with Professor Al-Hidabi, and the spirit that we tried to put in our first collaborations. This is the second webinar. We will have 3 this year, and then we see how we go forward. Sophia is a pontifical university linked to the Vatican, and it's a rather original situation, because it's surely one of the first memorandums of understanding between an Islamic university and the pontifical university everywhere. On the basis of what I read, I quoted from the document, is on that basis that we felt immediately an affinity with what Professor Dr. Al-Hidabi told us about the effort in the same direction of the International University, Islamic University of Malaysia. And that when he came to Sophia just before the pandemic. And that's why we have signed this first memorandum of understanding, and as a first common initiative, these webinars. Okay. As announced, I will moderate the whole session. We will hear now our 2 speakers on the subject of ecology. So the first speaker we give the floor is Professor Walid Faris, a distinguished scholar, and I read something of his curriculum. Very interesting, because he's a professor in mechanical engineering and aerospace in the aerospace department, College of Engineering in the International Islamic University of Malaysia, and he is a very well-known scholar in the field of engineering. Published more than 120 journal papers in internationally indexed scientific journals, and also around 110 conference papers plus 6 books on engineering. But that's not the only element of his rich curriculum. In addition, and that is why I think we are very interested, because the combination of the hard sciences and the attention to the societal implications, the ethical implications of our technological development is a very important point to us. So he is also an active researcher in the field's integration of knowledge, leadership, Islamic history, ethics, and spirituality. He published 6 books in English, so Julius Caesar, you will have to read something, and 7 Arabic in these fields. And I turn my head to Majid, who is Palestinian and who can read your books in Arabic. And you do not see him. Can we?
No, I saw him. He came. Already waved.
So, yeah, Professor Faris, you will speak us about Al-Ghazali. Just a few words. I guess you will present Al-Ghazali yourself. But I was very interested because we have a PhD who is finishing now on working on an issue of the texts of Al-Ghazali compared with Tommaso d'Aquino, who is maybe the Al-Ghazali of the Western world in the Middle Age. When I tried to understand a bit better this figure, well, Al-Ghazali was a theologian, a philosopher, a mystic, and he studied law. He was Persian, and he is from he was born in 1058 and died in 1111. One of his great merits is that he united the Sufism, so the mystical current, if I may say that very roughly, with the legal orthodoxy. In the West, they compared them, I said already, with Thomas von Aquino, and who lived a bit after Al-Ghazali. But Al-Ghazali, is very interesting, did also studies in cosmology, physics, and law. That was not so strange in that time. Also in the West, people were able to have a very broad Al-Ghazali, that's very interesting also, has written more or less 50 books. And I counted that available in the libraries today in Italian, there are at least 18 books of him. Professor Walid Faris, the floor is to you. I think you will introduce us to a very interesting perspective. We are all ears for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind presentation and also for the introduction. And thank you for the invitation to begin with. In fact, I really appreciate it. And I hope you will not be disappointed. Okay, let me start by a few things. In the title that has been chosen was Ecology and Environmental Ghazali Perspective. There is a tradition in the Islamic knowledge that people, when they start to explain anything, they have to define what they are talking about. So all the classical books, I'm not talking about the modern books, the old books, when you start to read in any book, people will start to define the scope and what they are going to talk about. And they call it even in Arabic تحرير المصطلحات, تحرير الحد والموضوع, يعني things like this one. What are the definition, what are the scope, and all these type of things. So also I will go quickly because of course no need, everybody knows this one. So As people simply define ecology, is a study of organisms and how they interact with the environment around them. And environment is the environment, a surrounding condition of person, creatures, plants, anything. So this is simply the definition of ecology and definition of environment. I know there's a much more sophisticated definition, but we start with the simple ones. Number two, we need to talk about Al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali, I think Professor Bernard made a very interesting introduction about him. He's a great figure. And this is why I chose him, in fact. And I'll come to this. So he's one of the most prominent and influential philosophers, theologians, and also jurists and mystics of the Sunni Islam. The main point is actually his work and influence transcends the Sunni Islam to other schools. He has an impact on Shiism, he has an impact on Ibadiyya, he has an impact on Jewish tradition, and he has an impact on Christian traditions. And if I'm not mistaken, I've been reading few references written in English about the influence of Ghazali. Many of the Christian philosophers and Jewish philosophers have been using many of his arguments, especially about the evidence of existence of God and many other things. So actually his extent is beyond Islam. It's not only within Muslims, but actually beyond Islam. This is why I chose him. Another issue also within the Muslim world, he is one of the main or a key figure to talk about the inner and outer tradition of Islam in a clear way, and also his views is considered the main view across the Muslim world. Yes, there's other views, definitely, and there's some different approaches and different scholars, but he's still one of the main figures that made the main view about the Sunni Islam in the Muslim world. As I mentioned, not only because he is a mystic, because in Sufism, people classify Sufism into, of course, many people classify different ways. This is just maybe a bit of a quick issue. If we have to discuss it, we can discuss it later if somebody have any question. But people usually classify the Islamic Sufism into three categories. One category is what we call practical Sufism. Practical Sufism, Al-Ghazali is a key figure in this one. So he is trying to link the inner and the outer part of the human being and put it into a construct, and this construct will lead at the end of the day to a good person, will lead to a good person through certain activities, certain what he used to say, heart worshipping acts, and also external worshipping acts. There is another type of Sufism, which is people classified as philosophical Sufism, and of course a key figure for the philosophical Sufism is Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi is, I think, is quite well known, and if I'm not mistaken, many even scholars in Europe wrote about him, and especially Italy, Spain, and also France. I think the key writings about him in these three countries. So, but his way, of course, the same approach about the inner and the outer part. But the main difference is the way he presents is a bit very sophisticated and very high level, so not many people can understand. Not the common person can understand. Al-Ghazali made this approach easily understood by the lay person. The ordinary Muslim will understand how to improve yourself. And then the third side of the Sufism, what people sometimes call it a kind of a Sufism of festives. That's the activities, like some people might see people gathering for food, gathering for remembrance or gathering for any other activity. So this is more like a festival rather than actually a practical Sufism. So this is why Al-Ghazali is very important, because he put the Sufi tradition in a very practical way and also applicable and understood to all people. Of course, his writings have different levels. This is another issue, but the majority of his work is accessible to the common person. He or she can read easily. So this is why I chose Al-Ghazali. Okay, let's come to, of course, when we talk about ecology, I was thinking to put some issues about the case of the world now about ecology and environment, but I found that I'm sorry to say we are in a big mess, so everybody cannot really ignore what the big mess that we are in currently in the world, whether this mess regarding environment, regarding ecology, regarding ethical issues, regarding political issues. So there's no need to talk about it. Actually, it's quite well known to everybody and quite clear. The main issue is to try to figure out how we can save the world from this mess somehow, as much as we can. So when we start to talk about Al-Ghazali views on environment and ecology, we need first to understand the cosmology in the view of Al-Ghazali, how Al-Ghazali understood cosmology and also his construct, and also how he understood the human being from the Islamic perspective, and he made his own construct. These two issues, I will start with them, and then I will go quickly over the other things. Referring, there are many books for Ghazali, but of course, one of the key books that are very well known among everybody is Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of the science of religion. This is a very well known book, and this is one of the widespread read books across the Muslim world and also beyond the Muslim world. And he has other books like philosophy and other things. We can look into, I didn't have much quotes, because if I put many quotes, it will be a very loading the presentation, the time will not allow. But the main thing is, Al-Ghazali looked at the world as a connected thing that meticulously planned by God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And God made this by his knowledge, which is timeless, according to the Islamic creed, timeless, and also has no deficiency and knows all the details, not only the major things, but all the details. So basically, in cosmology and Ghazali perspective, nature is a process in which all elements harmoniously dovetail with one another, whether it's celestial movement, natural process, human action, and even the redemption in the afterlife. And we'll come to this part also because it's a very interesting part. We'll look into it. So it's all a kind of a causality relationship. What you do good, you will see good. You do bad, you will see bad. This is not only between the this life and the afterlife, but we will see that also within this life, the spiritual and the physical side of this world. So it's a kind of a causality relationship, cause and effect type of thing, as we understand it. Because Al-Ghazali also has a kind of a more detailed discussion on causality, but this is not the place to discuss this one. Definitely many people have been acquainted with this one. Another also issue for how Al-Ghazali viewed the cosmology, these are two quotes from one of his, it's actually a very small book, but this book is also very powerful writing. It has been translated to English and many other languages, not only English. In Arabic, it's called Mishkat al-Anwar. in English, one translation, niche of lights, and some people call it some other things, window of lights. So there are a few translations, different translations. So I will quote him here, according to one of the best translation of this book. He said, you have learned from this, the previous discussion that he mentioned, that the eye is of two eyes, outward and inward. The outward eye derives from the world of sensation and visibility. So here he talks about senses, and he talks about our natural eye, the vision that we have. While the inward eye derives from another world, namely the world of dominion, or we can translate it as the spiritual world. Each of these two eyes has a sun and a light through which sight in these worlds is perfected. Means the natural eye, I cannot see clearly unless there is a clear light, and this clear light will come from the sun or from the, of course, at their time there was no electricity, so the sun or the moon. But also the inner eye has something similar to it, will make it see sharply, So the outward sun belongs to the visible world, and it is a sun perceived by the senses. So the light that we see from outside that will make our eyesight perfected is the sun, the light, the natural light that we have. But the one inside, the inward eye, is actually belongs to the world of dominion, the spiritual world. And it is the Quran and the revealed books of God. And it is very interesting here. Ghazali also referred to this idea a lot, in fact, in many of his writings, that he was stressing that all the books, of course, the Quran, he's referring to the main one because this is for the Muslim creed, but he was also saying that the revealed books is also guiding people to the way of God, if they read it and understood it properly. So this is the main issue, and the same in the Quran. So, and like in this quote, he mentioned the Quran and the revealed books of God, which we know that related to the Christian and the Jewish tradition. Another quote also, which is also very interesting, to put the cosmology of Al-Ghazali very clear. Know that the cosmos, al-alam, they call it al-alam, is two words. It's alaman, a spiritual and bodily. And he said this might be called differently, but they are still the same. So there is a spiritual side of this world, and there is a bodily side of this world. Or this bodily, we can translate it now like materialistic side of the world. And also he said we might say another terminology, sensory side of the world, and also rational side of the world. And I would like also to comment quickly, especially if anybody is working on Ghazali or looking into it. When Ghazali talk about rationalism, is not the rationalism as understood by the Renaissance. It's not. When he talk about rationalism, aqli, he talk about rationalism which is guided by the light of belief, which has a spiritual part. So when people, because usually when it is translated into English, people call rationalism. Yes, it is rationalism, but not the rationalism in the context of the Renaissance. It is a rationalism in the context of tradition, tradition. And also this world can be called alam ulwi wa alam sufli, high, up world, and also lower world, upward and lower world. All these words are close in meaning. They differ only through different viewpoints. Why? Because people have, sometimes they call it differently, because whenever they want to approach a certain issue, they might use upper and lower world, or they might use a kind of sensory and rational, or they might use a spiritual and bodily one. So the main issue here, Ghazali said that this world that we are living in is not one world as we imagine. is not one way. Is not one way. It is an interactive activity, or there is an interaction between one side, which we can see, we can sense, and there is another hidden side that we don't see, but we feel. We don't see, but we feel. And the only way to understand this hidden side is the revealed tradition, whatever revealed books God revealed to humanity. So this type of thing will be very important when we come to how he approach the creation, the environment around him. This is a very interesting paper written, published recently by some colleagues here in Malaysia. And they tried to put the view of Al-Ghazali about the human being in a kind of a drawing. So I picked it up because it's much more better to be visual rather than to just explain the thing by words. So Al-Ghazali also view if the world is also two worlds, is spiritual and physical world. Also, human being is two human beings. We are not one. We are not one thing. We are two sides. We are two sides. There is a spiritual part or inner part, as people sometimes call it, and then there is an external part or outer part, as some other people call it. The physical body of the human being, which have the desires, will have the sensory system, will have all of this. This is the physical part of the human being. But this is not the human being. This is not the human being. It's only one side of the human being. The other side is a spiritual part. And this spiritual part will have the intellect, will have the emotion, will have many things. And of course, a key issue, Al-Ghazali talked about the issue of heart. And again, when Ghazali talks about the heart, he's not talking about the physical heart that we have. He's not talking about the heart as defined by modern science, but he talked about something spiritual heart, and he defined this in his book Revival of Religious Sciences. He said it is in Arabic they call it Latifa Rabbani. It's a something very you cannot see, you cannot touch, but it is connected to your physical heart. So whatever will happen in the spiritual heart will be reflected in the physical heart. This is very interesting argument, and he has a lot of details about it. And interestingly, science have, and the modern science now, have a bit of the same direction to some extent. But so what he refer here as heart is not the physical part, it is the spiritual part. And as I mentioned, when he talked also about aql or intellect, he talked about the intellect or rationalism in a different context from what the Renaissance is talking about rationalism. So this is the relation between the inner feelings that we have, or the spiritual status that we have, and the physical one. And both of them are affecting each other. And this is one of the main issues that Al-Ghazali put, that for the world, the physical and spiritual will impact each other, and also for the human being, the physical and the spiritual will impact each other. And this will have a very impact on the environment, will have a very big impact on the other things. Okay. Another concept that we need to understand to see how Al-Ghazali built his own construct on this is the concept of authority. The concept of authority. The concept of authority for Ghazali is very clear. Of course, based on the Islamic tradition. God is the main thing. God is the main thing. Then comes the human being, the man who is entrusted to carry on the activity on in this universe. So the man is actually, the universe is not man-centric, is actually God-centric. This is how Ghazali viewed it. So the universe is God-centric, not man-centric. Man is coming only as an intermediate issue. This is part of the reason of creation of humanity, according to the Islamic tradition and according to Ghazali view, that human beings are created to be tested, and to be entrusted with this universe, how they are going to behave in this world, how they are going to keep this trust. So basically, Earth, environment, the whole universe is our trust. God gave us this universe as a trust, and He is observing us how we are doing or what we are doing with this trust. Are we wasting it? Are we keeping it? Are we whatever? And of course, God will give instructions, general instructions. So the man need to follow this instruction. And this is what Al-Ghazali put it in some of his books in a different way. What we can translate into English like a spiritual authority. The spiritual authority. The spiritual authority here, or in Al-Ghazali context, is not for a person. A spiritual authority for God. That's it. Finish. And then this spiritual authority means that there's guidelines, and the human being need to follow these guidelines to live peacefully and harmoniously with the environment. And then after the man came the creation. So why the creation will come at the base? Because according also to Al-Ghazali and according to the Islamic tradition in general, the creation is not the reason for any imbalance in this world. Only the man is, as I will mention later, the human being is the main reason for any imbalance in this world. That's the whole thing. But all the other creatures are actually working according to what God put into them, the instinct that He put into these creatures, whether these creatures are animals, whether these creatures are plants. Of course, also he has a very interesting view that even what we believe that is not non-living items like stones, like mountains, they are actually from his own view living, not unliving. So he classifies all of this as living creatures. But some of these creatures we can see the way they live, and some of these creatures we cannot see. We don't understand their language. We don't understand their feelings, but they have language and they have feelings, and this refers to stones and other things. And he has a very interesting, small also booklet, in fact. And I think also this was translated into English, but I didn't see the translation. I heard that it was translated. The name of this small booklet is called Ajaib al-Makhluqat, the miracles of the creation. And he is one of the very early scholars in the Islamic tradition who focus on this issue, that everything that God created, even he picked up some creatures, and he will talk about how this creature, for example, some of them are insects, some of them are animals, and some are plants, and he will talk how these creatures are created in a perfect way, and they are doing their job in a perfect way. And this is for him is a miraculous thing that also confirm the existence of God. So he had a lot of issues, and unfortunately some of his small books, like the one that I mentioned, The Niche of the Lights, and also The Miracles of Creation, many other things, they are not as famous as his bigger books, like Ihya Ulumuddin, The Revival of Religion, and also his famous books about philosophy and other things. But these small books are very, very unique in nature, very, very unique in nature. And one of them also related to the relation between the Quran and the creation as well. Another also idea Al-Ghazali mentioned in many places, in fact, that the world and the human being are reflection to each other. And he mentioned this clearly in one of his statement in Ihya Ulumuddin, that the human being is a minor universe. There is the big universe, which we are living in, these galaxies and all this type of things. But the human being is a representation, is a kind of a miniature representation of the universe. This is why, as I mentioned, he talked about the universe have spiritual and physical side, and the human being will have physical and spiritual side. And there is a kind of a manifestation between the world and the human beings. It's a long discussion, in fact, and very interesting discussion. But as I mentioned, I'm trying just to put headlines. Definitely, if somebody is interested, there's a lot of resources related to this. Okay. Now, after all of this, how we can see Al-Ghazali construct for ecology, how Al-Ghazali will see the whole world, the whole environmental issues of the whole. Of course, the term ecology, the term environment was not there at this time, but what we are going to see is how he view this system, the system. So, in summary, the world is created by God in a very well-balanced and harmonious way. Clear. He mentioned this several times. He proved it even rationally in many of his books and in his. Number two, the man or the human being is interested in keeping the ecological balance according to divine instructions. So Allah entrusted us, God entrusted us with this universe, and he gave us guidelines. If we don't follow these guidelines, the imbalance will take place. But if we follow the guidelines, the imbalance will not take place. Another thing also, which is a very common idea, he mentioned it in Arabic, we call it taskhir. So God made the world accessible to humans to explore, invent, and prosper. Means that this universe has been made, we can call it subdued to the human beings to do whatever they want with it, to explore, to learn, and to advance, and to progress. So, and this type of subdue is actually a God-given gift. Is not really the man is a divine character. No, this is a kind of a God-given gift to the humanity to see how they are going to deal with this gift, whether they are going to respect it and use it in the right way, or they are not going to respect it and use it in an improper way. Also, as I mentioned, this is very clear. The highest authority in the world is spiritual authority. You call it God, you call it spiritual authority, but it is a spiritual authority. And the reference here for spiritual authority, that the authority that comes from the revealed tradition, not the authority that comes from people. No, it is the authority that comes from revealed tradition. Another also part in this construct is the duality between the spiritual world and the physical world. The duality between the spiritual world and the physical world. So there is a kind of interactive relation between both sides. And he has a very famous statement that sometimes even have been misunderstood by whether Muslims or non-Muslims, unfortunately. But he said the world could not be created better. This is a very famous statement for him. The world could not be created better. So what God created, the balance that God created, it cannot be made better, cannot be made better. So what we need to do is we need just to try to maintain it in this way. Okay, so this is what we can call the construct of Al-Ghazali to the whole, to the universe, or to the world, or for the ecology. If we look at the ecology as I mentioned, the environment around us, and the interaction between creatures and human beings and other things. Okay, so now, what are the reasons for imbalance in the world, or in the ecology, or in the environment? As I mentioned again, the word ecology and environment is not used by Ghazali, but he used the word al-alam. So this is what we are referring to. So here are a list of what he mentioned, why there is imbalance, or why there is a corruption in the world. Number one, human beings, not any other creature, is a source of any imbalance in the world. This has been repeated by him in several places. So other creatures are creatures of God. They are following God's instruction. The only creature that does not follow, or he has the free will not to follow, is a human being. So any problem will happen in this world, it will be, the source of it will be the human beings, will not be any other source. Number two, he said one of the main reasons for the imbalance in this world, في هذا العالم, to replace the spiritual authority with materialistic authority. And there is, I'm not sure if some of you have came across some of the writing of this French writer, a very famous French writer, in fact, but he's quite known to very few people, not many. René Guénon, I don't know. René Guénon has a very interesting booklet, actually, on the idea of spiritual authority, but he wrote it from other religion point of view. He wrote it from the Hindu and the Buddhist point of view, and he touched on Islam. So this idea has been very clear for Ghazali, actually. The spiritual authority is the main issue. Once human beings will replace spiritual authority by materialistic authority, imbalance will take place. The imbalance will take place in this world. And of course, he doesn't call it imbalance, but he call it al-fasad, the corruption. The corruption will take place. So all forms of human corruption on earth are also sources of imbalance. Whatever this corruption, ethical, cultural, political, even academic, whatever. Spiritual corruption will lead to physical corruption, and the physical corruption will lead to spiritual corruption. And this is a very interesting also idea that he repeated in all his books, and of course it has been very clearly explained in his main work on the revival of the Islamic sciences, that if you want to keep the human being, if you want to keep his physical side away from corruption, he needs to take care of his spiritual side first. And also, if the environment around us is corrupt physically, it will impact our spiritual side and it will lead to corruption of the spiritual side. So there is a continuous dynamics between the spiritual side and the physical side. If it is improving, then the physical side will improve. If it is corrupted, the physical side will corrupt. If there is a corruption on the physical side, will impact also the spiritual side, and so on. Another main issue that Ghazali focused on in many of his books, actually, he wrote about, maybe he mentioned this clearly in his main book, Revival of Islamic Sciences, and also he mentioned it in separate books on this topic, the arrogance of human beings, and that human beings sometimes want to play the role of God. And he said this will lead to the destruction of the humanity, will lead to the destruction of the universe. And of course, he had a very interesting argument that actually he said that the biggest sin that a human being can do, more than even committing sexual deviance or even committing killing or anything, is arrogance. And according to him, arrogance will lead to all the evil acts. Arrogance will lead to killing, arrogance will lead to racism, arrogance will lead to all these types. He has a very beautiful discussion on several places of his writing on how arrogance is the main source of the corruption in this universe, the imbalance in this universe. Also, Al-Ghazali is a very realistic thinker. So when he talks about the universe, or what we can call the ecology and the environment now, he talks in a very realistic manner. he is not dreaming of lasting peace and paradise on earth. And actually, he mentioned this clearly in several places. Actually, there's no paradise on earth. This is something we need to forget. And there's also lasting peace. It will never happen. But what we have, the lasting peace will be only in the hereafter, or as in the Christian tradition, in the kingdom of God. So, but lasting peace on earth will never happen. And also having a paradise on earth will never happen. But what we can do is actually to try to improve the situation. So we need to be more realistic about the expectation that we are going to face, and also the realities that we are going to face. And also, according to him, human beings are inclined to corrupt as long as there is no spiritual guidance. Of course, he based his discussion on the Islamic sources, that human beings without spiritual guidance tend to corrupt. So if there is a spiritual guidance, human beings will go on the straight path, as-sirat al-mustaqim, but otherwise they will tend always to go away. They will tend always to go away. So the spiritual guidance or the spiritual authority will be the only way to make sure that human beings are actually in the right direction. Otherwise, definitely we cannot guarantee they will be on the right direction. Another issue also, he mentioned that we need to understand that life is full of difficulties, natural disasters, man-made disasters, and losses. And he based, of course, his discussion on also many of the issues mentioned in the Quran and also in the tradition of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So from all this tradition, he put this view clear. So we need to understand life is not a vacation, and life is not a kind of a paradise. No, it is naturally full of difficulties, disasters, problems, and other things. Yes, there's some points of happiness, some points of peaceful living and harmony, but this usually will not last. Why? Because the only place that we will have the lasting peace is in the hereafter, or as I mentioned, in the Christian tradition, the kingdom of God. So dreaming of paradise on earth will not happen because of the human nature and its internal conflicts between good and evil. And he has a very interesting theory about ethics also related to this, directly related to this, when he mentioned that any human being will have both good ethics and bad ethics embedded in him. So it's like in the engineering terminology, it's a kind of an embedded software. It's a kind of an embedded software. So all of us will have the good ethics and the bad ethics. But what will make some of us good and some of us will be bad, because we actually let the inherited or the embedded bad ethics take over the good ethics by our action, or we make the good ethics taking over the bad ethics by our action. So this is will define the good and the bad in both ways. And coming to, okay, what is the solution? What is the solution according to him? How the idea of course, he used the word salah. Salah means the what I translate here as balanced ecology, but salah means actually things going back to the natural harmonious thing. So he used the two words salah and fasad. Fasad is the imbalance, which I translate as an imbalance, and also salah is actually which I translate as the balanced universe and balanced life. So his solution is very clear. He mentioned it also in his book, Revival of Islamic Sciences, and other books as well. We can summarize it as these are the steps. Number one, returning back to the spiritual authority. Without returning back to the spiritual authority, according to him, there's no hope. Without returning back to the spiritual authority, according to him, there is no hope actually in improving our situation. So this is number one. Number two, the continuous struggle to improve the human spiritual life, because this will lead to a good physical life. And this is what he mentioned about the interaction between the spiritual and the physical side of the world and also of the human being. And he has a lot of very beautiful quotes in different places that anything that any corruption will happen in the universe, like, for example, even disasters or something like this, this is due to a spiritual corruption in the other side of the universe. So people have done something not good. So this is will be the kind of a reaction. So whatever is done, whatever corruption in the spiritual side of the world will lead to a corruption in the physical side of the world. And also he has an interesting discussion about evil acts need to be countered by good acts, not but by good acts. So he is talking about the struggle to maintain goodness. And according to him, and of course this is also based on the Islamic sources, that God created us to do this job. So our main job on earth is the continuous struggle to maintain goodness. If we don't do this effort, then the whole universe will collapse, ecology will collapse, environment will collapse, everything will go haywire. So according to Ghazali, our main job on this earth is the continuous struggle to maintain goodness. And as I mentioned, he put also clear expectation to this, so people will not dream of or will have over expectation. And he has also a very interesting view that part of our struggle for goodness, we should not underestimate anybody, a human being or a creature or anything that is created around us, because everything is created is for a reason. And according to him, hikmah, the wisdom of God behind it. The wisdom of God is the reason behind creating people of different colors. The wisdom of God is behind creating people male and female. The wisdom of God is behind creating insects, cockroaches, flies, and also creating lions, creating elephants, creating all this type of things. The wisdom of God is behind everything that we are seeing around us. So his view is we should not, it is a very wrong spiritual mistake, if we can call it like this, to underestimate a person or underestimate a creature. And the only way to maintain the balance on this world is actually to always be humble, and to learn and to accept the spiritual authority. Then this will be the way to keep the balance and the harmonious structure of this world. These are the main issues that I wanted to cover. I'm not sure I exceeded my time or not, but I think this is what I wanted to share. Hopefully it is useful. I hope so. And if you have any other thing, we can, of course, we can discuss later if there's any other questions or any other things. As I mentioned, what I mentioned here are headlines. This discussion is very long. Ghazali, though I'm not a religious scholar, but I have been reading Ghazali books for the past, since I was a teenager. So for the past 40 years. Wow. And I still read and enjoy and learn. So I'm not a scholar of Ghazali, but I'm just I consider him a kind of a spiritual guide, if we can call it like this. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Faris. I think we passed 3/4 of an hour in a good company, not only Al-Ghazali, but also with you. I think we have much to meditate. I find many things that because I know the text of Professor Puglisi, I found many elements that touched me in comparison. But let's give the floor immediately to Professor Puglisi. Just my duty to present him. If I find my echo. Actually, he's a doctor in chemistry. He has a very rich, he's a very international figure. He's staying in London for the moment, but he's Sicilian, so Italian. He worked in Vienna, in Istanbul. He's part of many international organs on ecology. He published also, and that's the reason why we invited him also, he published, because of his experience in Turkey, he was able to develop a kind of dialogue on ecology with the Muslim world. For example, he published in 2020, The Religious Vision of Nature in the Light of Laudato Si, an interreligious reading between Islam and Christianity, or a faith-based environmental approach for people and the planet, some interreligious perspectives on our Earth embeddedness. His curriculum is too rich, and I think we just wait for 40 minutes and you will be convinced, as I was, that this was a good choice. The floor is up to you.
Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. To the many sisters and brothers connected online, and to the friends in Sofia. Thanks, Professor Walid, for your very interesting, inspiring talk. And I must commend you for the clarity of your presentation, despite the very ungodly hour for you in the US. You're in the middle of the night. So special word of sympathy from my side. Right, so I thought I'll start my presentation by showing this picture that some of you might recognize. It is called the Blue Marble, and it was taken in 1972 during the Apollo 17 mission. That's about 50 years ago, 51. We're in the context of the space explorations, but this iconic picture symbolizes much more than just an incredible scientific and technological advancement. It is a picture with a profound spiritual, if you want, humanistic value. For the first time, we see humanity and our planet in its entirety. All of a sudden, we become aware for the first time in history that this is our common home, that there are no borders, that we are a global family. I think it's a very good reminder this time in history in which we seem to be very polarized and divided on many fronts. Since then, 50 years ago, if we think is in geological terms is just a blink of an eye, humanity has experienced enormous changes at all levels. The world population, for instance, in 50 years has more than doubled. Life expectancy has considerably extended for pretty much all the people on the earth, and huge masses of population have moved from rural to urban areas. And yet at the same time, again, for the first time in history, the stability of our planet has become something that we can no longer take for granted. We know that the environmental crisis is the very design of our future, is deeply connected with the way we understand now the relationship with nature and how do we develop a new model for humanity for the future. The United Nations with the Agenda 2030 has set out a chart with the 17 goals for sustainable development in order to articulate better environmental commitment with ethical values. And I believe that together, Muslims and Christians, if we think we represent more than 50% of the world population. We, as sisters and brothers, reflected together on this historical challenge, can really give, as people of faith, a great contribution to this unprecedented challenge. And in this context, faith communities are already working together now for a few years. Lately in 2021, on the 4th of October, at the Vatican, faith leaders of all religions, together with Pope Francis, pledged their commitment for the environment in what is called the Faith Plans for People and the Planet, which represents the most prominent and the boldest environmental initiative to date by global faith community. My task now for the next half an hour is to briefly explore, highlight the specific contribution of Pope Francis, which I would like to say from the very beginning is not something that comes out of a vacuum. It's in full accordance with the biblical thought and the Christian tradition, particularly embedded into the Catholic tradition, but more in general Christian tradition. And I believe can offer to the current ecological debate something original and new. In doing this, I'm motivated by the belief that bringing together, as Professor Walid has already said, bringing together the element of the sacred in a conversation about nature can really hold the key for a lasting and credible ecological conversion. I'm also deeply convinced that bringing together the ethical and the spiritual around the theme of ecology represents also a very unique opportunity for a renewed interreligious encounter. And I'm very happy to see how Sophia is building this relationship with your university and so on. But before we delve into Pope Francis's vision on ecology, I'd like to spend a few words on the philosophical, cultural, and historical background from a Western perspective now, on which the relationship between religion and environment has developed in the West. Now, although our immediate perception of the ecological crisis is that of a problem of industrialized societies, this could arguably also be seen as a religious or spiritual problem. And this not only because religions must have a word to say in the face of a crisis that touches upon the lives of many faithful throughout the world, but rather, and it's a bit more controversial now, some people have argued because the ecological crisis seems to have its roots precisely in the wrong interpretation of the relationship between human beings and nature that is embedded in the religious traditions. Particularly in Christianity, some contemporary thinkers have in fact accused Christianity of having somehow started the ecological problem because of a misinterpretation of Book of Genesis. So let's look together at these critical positions. The American historian Lynn White, in a famous article published in Science in 1967, I'm sure Professor Walid is familiar with this, entitled The Historical Roots of the Ecological Crisis, states, in antiquity, every tree, every spring, every stream, every hill had its own genius loci, its guardian spirit. Before one cut a tree, mined a mountain, or damped a brook, it was important to placate the spirit in charge of that particular situation and to keep it placated. By destroying pagan animism, Christianity made it possible to exploit nature in a mood of indifference of the feelings of natural objects. The spirits in natural objects, which formerly had protected nature from man, evaporated. Man's effective monopoly on spirit in this world was confirmed, and the old inhibitions to exploitation of nature crumbled. Now, here White's criticize, I must say rather harshly, perhaps, Christianity, particularly, he continues in his article, particularly the Western version of Christianity. We know the Eastern tradition of Christianity has had quite a different development, for being the most human-centered religion the world has ever seen. Now, is it true? As perhaps White is slightly exaggerating on this, but he's got a point that we need to take into consideration. In the book of Genesis, we find two opening scenes about the narrative of the relationship between human beings and nature that are very important really to frame this conversation. The first comes from Genesis 1, and I quote, "God blessed them and said to them, 'Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground.'" And this is followed by Genesis 2, which is also another very powerful image here. "So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals." I'm pretty sure there are a lot of parallels with the Quran as well about Genesis from this point of view. White's criticism seems to revolve precisely around those two opening scenes in which human beings emerge as, a domineering figure, as though we were giving license to abuse nature. But today theologians tell us that that word that is used in Hebrew, which is kabas, that we translate as subdue, rather translate the word of settlement in a given territory. In Islam, I think it would be Khalifa, with which God blesses the capacity of human beings to generate life and the capacity of stewardship, Khalifa, over the earth. Therefore, the earth and the animals are, yes, entrusted to human beings, but primarily as a gift, as something to take care of. And under that sign of care, of taking care, of dare to care, Christianity interpreted up until the Middle Ages, and here is very interesting to notice how Al-Ghazali and, for instance, St. Francis are nearly contemporary here. So the Middle Ages is a very critical time really to understand the passage from one age to another, also in the relationship between human beings and nature. If we had to choose a word to encapsulate the kind of relationship up until the Middle Ages, it would be, in fact, collaboration. Monasticism in the West, but also in the East, was so profoundly aware of this to preserve, for instance, the most beautiful forests in Europe that remain up until today and have become UNESCO World Heritage. There was a merit of monks and sisters who really defended the beauty and of forests all over Europe. And as we mentioned, St. Francis, with his own life, gives us an extraordinary testimony of such relationship. It would be interesting to read the Canticle of the Creatures together today, but I'm sure everybody is already familiar with that. And if you don't, it's something that I could refer you to. But he expresses an absolute, cosmic, and all-embracing beauty that permeates the whole of creation, to the point that he can call brothers and sisters all the celestial bodies, like the sun and the moon and the rest of creation. Again, it strikes me here, the closeness and between Al-Ghazali and Francis also in temporal terms. Again, St. Francis, in his Franciscan Sources, which is pretty much the rule he left to his first companions, writes something which is very interesting, I think, in this context. Francis asked that part of the garden, the friary garden, always be left untouched, so that the wild flowers and herbs could grow there, and those who saw them could raise their mind to God, the creator of such beauty. And I find this very beautiful, because with this, Francis is expressing more than just a poetic, sensitivity, but a real concrete love for biodiversity, which is now becoming one of the central themes of our ecological concern. In the West, up until this point in history, human beings perceived themselves in the world mostly us in a mystical and sacred reality, larger than our own mind and larger than what our own mind is capable of grasping. It's only with the Enlightenment, with the Western rationalism, as Walid very rightly pointed out, and modernity, that we assist in a progressive separation between the realm of the sacred on one hand and that of the rational philosophy, but rationalistic in Western interpretation on the other. This led in time to the destruction of that vision of the world of which the human person had been part of until that point. Pardon. Yeah, gradually human beings begin to conceive themselves primarily as rational individuals, which is nothing wrong with, but detached from the natural world. And this is precisely in this sense of separation, in this destruction of the enchantment, if you want, that lies the first sign of our ecological crisis. Now, on the concept of separation insists the contemporary philosopher Michel Serres, who sets again the word religion, its etymological contrary, negligence. And Serres very sharply argues that religion indicates a tendency to take care of, see God's mandate in Genesis that we just explore, or to look with attention at something. On the contrary, he says, modernity neglects speaking in absolute terms. And I find this very insightful in our conversation. However, a more holistic and sacred vision of the human-nature relationship has remained alive and embedded in history, in Christianity, and I would like to highlight particularly two places in which this relationship has remained healthy, if you want. One is liturgy. In the liturgical experience of the Church, particularly in the East, this time, in the Eastern Orthodox rites, but also in the West, nature plays an important role in keeping together the spiritual and the natural. Liturgy, in fact, urges the believer to continually include and sanctify matter on one hand and time on the other hand, in which every liturgical element aims at connecting the faithful in an event of communion with other members of the community and with the material world involved in the liturgy. Starting, for those who are familiar with Christian symbology, with the bread and the wine of the Eucharist, that are sourced from the material world. They come from nature. The ancient liturgies aim to involve all our senses in the liturgical event. For instance, the eyes, when we look at icons or liturgical vestments, or the ears when you listen to hymns and psalmody, or the nose through the incense, placing the liturgy really at the center of creation, or if you want, creation at the center of liturgy. The second element which I find inspiring in this conversation regarding the way Christianity has maintained that holistic vision is embedded into the mystical tradition, into the mystical experience. And again, Al-Ghazali is very much in tune with that. We find, for instance, the example of St. Francis that we already touched, but there are so many other examples in all religions, in Islam, in Christianity, in Judaism, and to report just one more contemporary example, I'd like to share the experience of Chiara Lubich, to whom Sophia University is particularly linked. During a period of particular spiritual experience, she perceives a strong presence of God's love, who, through his continuous creative action, sustains all things. And I quote, "If we could see beyond the veil of creation, we will find the one who sustains everything we see and orders and moves it. Mystics often had intuitions or intellectual visions of what we normally people cannot see. What happens to be distinct, separated, a flower, the sky, the sun, the moon, the sea, or a puddle, the mystics saw unified by a loving light governing everything, as if all of creation were one song of love, as if the stones and snow, the flowers and stars were so united in their essence with that light and with one another that they seemed to have been created as gift to one another, being in love with all the others. Again, in full accordance with the biblical tradition here and the Christian tradition, Chiara seems to recuperate that original person-nature relationship as not separated anymore from the God-human being and God-nature relationship, as is already pointed out, but rather emerges a beautiful picture here of reality as a whole of creation permeated by a logic of love. Chiara perceives love as the immanent law of nature, and love as a qualitative factor that regulates the relationship among the natural elements. And I quote again, Chiara, and the fact that God was beneath things meant that they were not as we see them, they were all linked to one another by love, also to speak in love with one another. So if the brook flowed into the lake, it was out of love. If the pine tree stood high next to another pine tree, it was out of love. We are therefore dealing here with a profound spiritual vision of the reality of nature, in which we are gradually urged to move from an individualistic perspective to a communitarian perspective, to finally move into a cosmic perspective. But let's go now to Pope Francis, because it is precisely in this spiritual and theological framework that in 2015, Pope Francis launched to the world his encyclical letter Laudato Si on care for a common home. This is an extraordinary document which touches on some of the modern myths upon which we have built our Western societies, challenging in many points in the encyclica the idea of unlimited material progress and extreme consumerism. The document has been received with great attention from the religious world and beyond, and I must say nearly has been received with more attention from outside the Catholic Church than from within the Catholic Church itself. Laudato Si presents itself as an extremely rich document that offers a variety of perspectives and multiple dimensions to which we can see the environmental crisis. And I would like to highlight 5 aspects of this encyclica in my attempt to illustrate the richness of Pope Francis' message on the theme of ecology and common home. So first point I'd like to make, 5 things about Laudato Si. The encyclica is not just about climate change. Although the care for common home is the starting point of the conversation that Pope Francis started, in reality, it goes to the very roots of the ecological crisis by making a critique of capitalism and the culture of waste and promoting the so-called integral ecology. And I quote, "A true ecological approach always becomes a social approach, which must integrate justice into the discussion on the environment, to hear," and this has become a very famous quote by Pope Francis, "both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor." Second point, it is addressed to everyone. The encyclical letter acknowledges the enormous benefit the science and technology have brought to society. So it's not a critique to science or technology. He says in Laudato Si 102, the science is a wonderful product of the God-given human capacity. At the same time, Pope Francis urgently appealed for a new dialogue about the way we are shaping the future of our planet, and to open a conversation that includes everyone. Since, he says, the environmental challenge we are doing and its human roots concern and affect all. Pope Francis finally specifically addresses women and men of faith as to find a new alliance, and it's very fitting that we're here together today to preserve the future of our planet. He says the majority of people living on our planet profess to be believers. That's around 85% of world population still profess to be some sort of believer. This should spur religions to dialogue among themselves for the sake of protecting nature, defending the poor, and building networks of respect and fraternity. Third point, the encyclical starts precisely from a spiritual vision of nature, inviting us all to take the world, and he says in a very beautiful way, more than a problem to be solved. I think it is very key. So when we look at the ecological crisis, it's not primarily a problem to be solved, but nature is a joyful mystery, says, that we contemplate with joy and praise. The fourth point, perhaps a bit less relevant in this context, but I think it's worth noticing, is that Pope Francis openly declares at the beginning of the document that other Christian leaders have embarked on this journey of protecting the environment, and it's worth noting particularly the role of His Holiness, the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, Bartholomew, and who was really been a champion of ecological theology, if you want, for 3 decades. In fact, at the launch of the encyclica, 2 high-profile people from the Catholic Church and from the Orthodox Church launched the encyclica together, just to show also, the closeness between the Church of the East and the Church of the West. But perhaps more relevant to this conversation is that Laudato Si attempts an encounter with Islam on several points. One point is linguistic. Pope Francis wanted to add Arabic right at the start of the official translations where the encyclical was released. This typically doesn't happen. Arabic comes after and is not considered in a major language to release a Vatican document. Right at the start, Pope Francis wanted this document to be released in Arabic, a significant gesture of openness towards the Islamic world and the Arab-speaking world in general. Second, timing, and I find this fascinating. The encyclical letter was dated 14th of May 2015. That year, that was an important Christian feast, was the Feast of Pentecost. But in fact, the official launch of the document was deliberately set on the 18th of June 2015, which coincided deliberately with the first day of Ramadan. And for the first time in history, the Catholic Church refers explicitly to a Muslim author in an encyclical letter. It's the famous Note 159, which has been, hotly debated. But Pope Francis here quotes the Muslim poet and mystic Ali Al-Khawaz. And I like to read this note because it's particularly beautiful. He says, prejudice should not have us criticize those who seek ecstasies in music or poetry. There is a subtle mystery in each of the movements and sounds of this world. The initiate will capture what is being said when the wind blows, the trees sway, water flows, flies buzz, door creak, birds sing, or in the sound of strings or flutes, the sighs of the sick, the groans of the afflicted. As I said, this is the first time the Pope wanted a Muslim author to be in a letter of the Vatican. With this, he's inviting us to rediscover the mystical significance of nature, and therefore, he says in the encyclica, the need not to put too much distance between the creatures of the world and the interior experience of God. Going towards the end, the vision that emerges from Laudato Si and from Pope Francis's view on ecology, I think can help us redefine the reference of the cosmos to God. There was a point that you made it very strong. Therefore, helping us to go beyond the current dramatic opposition between human beings and nature. How much should human thrive and how much should nature be preserved? So perhaps we enter now, instead of a tug of war between humans and nature, into a new triangular relationship: human being, God, nature. Nature rediscovered as carrying a spiritual significance, and for those who are not maybe religious, at least acknowledging that carries a metaphysical significance, the point beyond itself, and for us believers, ultimately towards God. In this perspective, creation is perceived, therefore, primarily as a gift whose first purpose is not that of being consumed, but to create a relationship. And human beings, I'm particularly fascinated by Surah number 2 on this, the Surah of the Cow about human beings, but I think it's very much in line. Human beings are no longer identified as superiors on other creatures for their intellect, but for their capacity to be in relationship with the rest of creation. To conclude, Pope Francis' vision on ecology, as it has been exemplified in Laudato Si, but also we don't have the time now, there's been a follow-up document, the Laudato Deum, and also a very interesting, now neglected really, document, Querida Amazonia, is rooted in a spiritual vision of nature, offering an opportunity for a renowned encounter particularly between Islam and Christianity. Today, all our hopes on the environment seems to be focused on science, on ethics. That's clearly very important. However, we know that also for personal life, the rules are not enough to get us out of crisis. Science and technology by themselves cannot solve the ecological problem. It is necessary to find other resources, other alliances beside human intellect that can help us decide the path onto which we want to walk as humanity. In other words, we need wisdom. Finally, I'd like to conclude with a word for those maybe in this seminar don't identify with any particular religion, or maybe they are on a journey of discovering faith. Laudato Si and the message of Pope Francis is also a universal invitation. He redefines the earth as the space for encounter and cooperation between everyone. The word love in the encyclica is quoted 70 times, so as to indicate a path onto which everyone of faith and non-faith, of all faiths, are invited to walk. As Chiara said, only being love, in fact, humanity can restore the gaze of love on herself and on the rest of creation, to discover that all beings are interconnected and in love with one another. And with this, I conclude, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Professor Puglisi. As you see, I'm not Professor Bernard Callebaut, who greets you. Unfortunately, he wasn't feeling well, so he had to go away. But for me, I'm Marta Pancheva. I'm also here, assistant professor in Sofia in economics. It was striking also the, let's say, the closeness between the two presentations in different part of the triangle structure that you both mentioned, of this relationship between the human being, God, and the nature. But I personally just came back from Chile yesterday. And for me, striking, I had the chance to talk to two indigenous people there from the Mapuche community, if I can call it. And listening to both the presentations, it was striking also the similarities that I found with what they were sharing as let's say, a relationship with nature, and how we somehow, as in our societies, maybe are really risking to lose this track of this close relationship, also with the spiritual, what Professor Faris was saying, this inner eye and the outer eye, I guess. So for me, it was really enriching to have these different perspectives, also that I found in these indigenous communities back in Chile. I think that now we have about 20 minutes that we can open up for the dialogue with all this, let's say, inputs that we had in the past hour and a half. So I would invite the participants to make questions or comments. and we can have this moment of dialogue. There is one raised hand. Please, I don't see the name, so please present yourself as well. Tafi, yes.
Yeah, hello everyone. Good morning. Morning for me, afternoon, evening for some of us. So, Assalamu alaikum to my professors from my university. I am a doctoral student in the Department of Usul ad-Din in the Kulliyah of Islamic Studies and at International Islamic University, Malaysia. My name is Noor Ahmad, by the way. And thank you for Dr. Walid and Dr. Antonio Polisi for your talk. So I'll keep it short. So basically, my question is that you talked about the spiritual dimension and the mystical dimension of the nature, things in the universe, and this also sort of, Dr. Walid, you also touched on this. So I would like to ask from each one of you the point of view from Imam Ghazali's perspective and also the Christian tradition, that how can we deal with the aspect of consciousness that at least we Muslims believe that it's extended to the things, inanimate objects, mountains, trees. And this the thread of consciousness goes across our Quran and Hadith tradition, and there are many examples. I think I don't need to mention these examples, but we believe that everything in the universe has a consciousness, and then maybe we may not understand the level of consciousness that we have, and I think that may contribute to maybe treating the nature in an ecological sense as respecting the environment. And how can we use that as a justification for taking care of the environment?
You can answer one after the other, maybe, starting from Professor Faris, if he wants to take the word.
Yes, I was giving the way to Antonio first.
Sorry.
Okay. I think it's very clear in the Islamic tradition in general, and this is what also I mentioned. There is a verse in the Quran, وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ. There is nothing on this universe unless it make praise to God in its own way. So scholars agree, actually, among in the Islamic tradition, that all things whether it is a living creature or none, what we classify, actually, it's according to our biological classification, it's non-living, but actually from the Islamic perspective, they are living. So the stones are living, the mountains are living, but they are interacting in a different way. They are interacting in a different way. So we classify, due to our ignorance, we classify them as non-living. This concept in itself, if we bring this concept into internalize this concept, of course, definitely I'm not going to violate this environment. I'm not going to violate. But the main issue is there is a big difference between what we read. The same thing, I think, according to across tradition now. People who read the Bible, people who read the Quran, or read other sources, there is a gap between reading and internalizing the meanings. This is the issue now. This is the big issue. So if I internalize the meaning, my interaction with the environment will be much more conscious. I will be more careful. I will not waste. I will not destroy. I will not make any things. But if I'm not bringing this meaning or internalize this meaning, definitely, as we see now, people just they go across jungles and they just eliminate the whole jungle for whatever reason, and destroy the nature, destroy many things. And of course, we're suffering now. We talk about climate change. We talk about all this stuff. But we are the creator of this as I mentioned, Ghazali say, we are the creator of all this imbalance. We created it. So it's our responsibility to try to return back again. This is my comment on the thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, if I may, the question on consciousness is a very interesting one because it's for science itself, it's difficult to define what consciousness is. So what religion traditions for millennia intuitively have felt that everything, as Lynn pointed out in that at the beginning of my presentation, had some sort of genius logic, some sort of what do you call it? Agency, yeah? All non-human beings and non-living things. Now, also science is slowly, coming to recognizing that the rest of creation, also very important physicists and biologists, are really blurring the borders between the different kingdoms, yeah? So what is important, I think, here to keep in clear, though, is as Abrahamic religions, we do believe that human beings have a special level of consciousness, because otherwise we fall into a pantheism. Everything is the same, right? So human beings have a special role in creation for the Christian tradition, for the Islamic tradition, but this doesn't deny that the rest of creation, including the non-living beings, have some sort of consciousness and therefore dignity and right on their own. On this point, I'd like to quote a contemporary philosopher, Bruno Latour. I don't know whether you're familiar with Bruno Latour, who disappeared only last year. And he advocated a parliament of things. He says, when it comes to making decisions about the future of our planet, there should be, the voices of all of creation should be represented politically, because everyone is a carrier of some significance, of some rights. So there should be in a parliament the voice of mountains be heard, the voice of rivers to be heard, and they can be done only through human beings. And this is a secular philosopher who is arguing something which is very much in line with what we've been discussing so far.
Thank you very much. There was another hand raised that disappeared. Fatmir, but maybe you already answered his question. If there are other questions also here in the...
Yeah, if you, I raised the hand, but I had a problem with the connection here. I just managed to come back.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Do you want to make your question
My name
now?
is Fatmir Shehu. I'm associate professor in the Suluddin Comparative Religion Islamic University, Malaysia. We just were listening to very distinguished professors that are, even though Prof. Walid said that he's not expert, but I believe that he is an expert in this field with his long background. We were able to listen to two very insightful lectures. I believe just look at this kind of lectures that we have between our university and Sofia University. And it is, as it was mentioned by Prof. Bennett, this is the second round that we have. And I have followed both of them. And I see that this is very interesting that when you look at one of very important issues that we are facing today. I wanted to ask the question that somehow Prof. Walid just explained when you look at the internalization of this commandments that we get from religion. When you look at both presenters, they look at it from two authorities that we have in our tradition. When you look at Imam al-Ghazali being one of the most influential scholars up to our time. And when you look at the authority that was mentioned by Professor Antonio, that is Prof. That he has come out with many but the reality that we see that the problem that we face, how to reach out the people and to create this awareness. Even when Prof. Antonio mentioned that but it seems like the religious people are not heard by many other people, let's say. even though they're struggling a lot to reach out, but still the problem is there. I don't presenting the religious communities to raise the voice. If people don't listen to one authority, they might listen to a united authority to represent the religious community. Listen to us, and looking at the minority, that we see that they are not related to any religious community. They don't have that conscience that it was just mentioned now, that is related to the accountability and responsibility that they will have or face in the world to come. So I don't know how both speakers the field is there, but what can be done based on the contribution of two authorities that we just heard now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I leave to you decide who will start.
So maybe Antonio this time first, and then next.
Yeah. I mean, if I understand correctly, is on the how to maximize really the voice and engage more faith communities, also on the political,
yes,
social,
exactly.
yeah. I think we live in a very special time. I mean, I find that in the West, the cultural climate is shifting, is changing, while perhaps only 10, 15, 20 years ago, there was a lot of prejudice towards the voice of faith communities. Institutions and governments are now more open, I think, overall, to listen to faith communities, to faith leaders, because they recognize the role they play in civil society on so many different levels. So what I would say, perhaps two things. One is really to step up, as communities. There are many fora, many places where we can be represented. The United Nations has started, for instance, the Multi-Faith Advisory Council. So whenever they take a major world decision on any topic, gender equality, environment, whatever, they have special commissions in which they hear the voice of faith communities. So I'm pretty sure throughout your network of people, you have some sort of representation already at the Multi-Faith Advisory Council. If you don't, it's perhaps the opportunity to do so, right? To exploit channels that already exist. Also, in the preparation of COP28, COP27 last year, there is always a parallel event for faith leaders in which they issue joint statements with other faith leaders that are read out to the plenary session of the United Nations General Assembly. So there are already a lot of channels that we can use. But the second thing I would like to say is that there is a work to be done on our side, on the side of faith communities, really to purify our language. So to make our point clear, rooted in the spiritual tradition, sound theologically, but accessible to everyone, to get out of the jargon that sometimes we get entangled into, so that everyone can understand. And that's, I think it's an effort we can make on our side, and it's an effort that society has to make on the other side in general, because there is very little religious literacy out there. People don't really know any more about religion at all. So maybe while there are I don't think there is much prejudice as much as there was a few years ago, but there's very little religious literacy that is not really helping the communication between faith communities and institutions.
I think of course, I concur with Professor Antonio on this one, especially the issue of religious literacy. There is a big problem actually in all faiths. In fact, people identify themselves as Muslims, but practically they don't know anything about religion, identify themselves as Christian, and they don't know anything about Christianity. And even the Jewish tradition, the same thing. So we are having a big problem in this one. But what I would like to add to these points is definitely for the big meetings like COP, like other things, it's very important to bring the discussion of the faith leaders. But we are facing problems in the disciplines themselves. For example, I think Professor Antonio might feel this one in UK and other things, because I have friends in UK as well. once you try to bring a spiritual side in a scientific discussion, you will be most of the time a bit odd. People will feel that you are a bit odd. And if you talk about physics or mathematics and then suddenly you bring a spiritual dimension, you'll find people it's not comfortable with the thing. So the scientific communities need to be a kind of a I wouldn't say collaboration, discussion, somehow like this, to lessen the bias to the issues related to tradition and religion. Why? Because it has been there, but suddenly it is different. I used to joke with my colleagues that unfortunately, since the Renaissance, there is a very famous French mathematician, Laplace, and there's a big joke about when he presented his book about about mechanics to, I think, Napoleon or something like this, and Napoleon asked him, "Where is God in your system?" He said, "There is no place to God in my system." So this idea, unfortunately, has been continuously progressing in the scientific community. Also, I have one of my colleagues in economy, and we have many economists here, and I was talking to him. He's teaching in one US universities, and then I was talking to him. He said, Walid, when we talk in economy, there's no God in economy. This is what they're saying. There's no God in economy. That doesn't exist in economy. So as long as we have this type of discussion, of course, there will be a big gap. And there will be no hope to reach out to the rest. But those who are maybe scientists in the fields, in the discipline, so we need to have people in the discipline, in the economy, in the science, in the physics, and engineering, who can try to elaborate ideas, put it in a simple way, as exactly as Antonio mentioned. You don't need to use jargon or very philosophical discussion, but straightforward things, which actually many people will not deny. And many of the things, the basic things, many people will not deny. So they have, it's actually a responsibility in all people of different disciplines to try to create this type of discussion. Among economists, among physicists, among chemists, among engineers, this will bring the idea. And of course, teaching these ideas also will be very useful. I think so.
Thank you, Bob. There is one more question here in the hall. Is Valentina?
Well, first, thank you, Antonino and Yale. It's the Walid. Okay, I'm sorry. So both of you, well, here I'm a student of Culture of Unity and Education for Dialogue. So basically, what I came to is to learn from different disciplines and cultures and put together, moving forward for processes, learning processes, I would say. So my question is about this. So both of you mentioned the idea of balance and harmony between ecological and environment, one more in the Al-Ghazali perspective, but the other one in Pope Francis perspective. So my curiosity is about what about between the learning and intercultural, interdisciplinary and intergenerational learning environments. So do you have any key points or experience of learning where the learning environments that you are both coming from, like universities, for example, like here or other places, that might look or explore or create processes of learning with this approach of a theoretical and practical way that could increase the curiosity and collaboration between students, professors, and staff in the sequence of learning from these different disciplines and cultures and different ages in order to work together.
Which maybe somehow was linked to the comment of
exactly.
Professor Parks before
yeah.
about this experts in different disciplines also.
Yeah.
Please.
Again, Antonio first.
No, you go first. You go first.
Okay.
If you want.
I think that we, on my side, we are having actually, not only myself, but we have many people try to do this. One of the challenges is actually, again, is how to simplify things. Let me give you an example. There's many courses about ethics in engineering. I'm talking about engineering because this is my background. And we used to have many textbooks on this, Western textbooks. The comment of the students usually would be, Doctor, this is very philosophical. I don't understand why we are learning this type of complicated things. So when we address the science students, especially science students, things need to be very straightforward and need to be very well structured. Otherwise, they will not be able to do. Yeah, for example, I teach mechanics. Part of some of the materials I'm teaching is mechanics. And in mechanics, we have statics and dynamics and other things. We have one part in dynamics, a important chapter called friction. Friction is a very interesting phenomenon, but in the same time is unexplored phenomenon. And so I ask the students usually to try to link between things. How do you think the world without friction? How do you think the world without friction? Without friction, I used to joke, I would say, we'll be like Mickey Mouse in the cartoon. We'll be flying everywhere. And then I'll ask them, who made this friction available? Of course, some people say nature, some people say God, some people say things, but this is how you make them think. You need to help them to think in a proper manner, because sometimes we study a phenomena and that's it. But who brought this phenomena in? How I study the periodic table, chemistry. Of course, Professor Antonio knows much more better than me. Okay, people study, memorize, do there's using it and blah 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 blah. But no, very few people reflect how this cyclic nature came from. From where? Came from where? So this type of questions, I think, in at least in my experience in teaching, will make people think. And it's very important to make people think in unbiased manner. Then, if they are religious, of course, they will understand. If they are not religious, at least they will appreciate the approach. They will appreciate the approach. So the main issue in teaching, in my opinion, I might be wrong, is to make people think. But of course, we ourselves also, we have to think first. Otherwise, we will not be able to make them think. So these type of simple questions, which we take it for granted, another issue. Sometimes I teach ethics from time to time. So I raise the question, why? I was a couple of students. You have friends? They said, yes, we have friends. So why do you like your friend? And then they said, I like him. But I asked, why do you like your friend? Can you define for me what is love? What is likeness? And people start to think this is a very complicated thing. It's not actually an easy issue. We take it for granted. I love X, I love Y. But what is love? This is a very big question mark. So many things having a very big question mark. Once I start to explore, I will appreciate that this world is much more complicated than I think. And also, if I am of a religious tendency, I will appreciate that there is a higher power behind this world. Whether you believe or you don't believe, it's up to you. This is, of course, God has given the choice for people to believe or to disbelieve. But at least we help them to think in a proper manner without bias. This is, I think, the main issue that we should do in science, according to my experience.
Yeah, I feel Professor Walid has already addressed it very well, but I think I totally understand where you're coming from. I think our educational systems are very segregated, too segregated, and we have become too politically correct as well. I mean, science is science. It must be respected in its autonomy of language, of methods, but we also human beings. We carry with us a set of values and beliefs and obsessions that we cannot really do without when we do science. So we are human beings doing something scientific. So it's good to bust down barriers, but at the same time to not to fall into concordism, what in Christian theology is called concordism. Everything can be mixed at any stage. Things have their own domains, they can dialogue, but you can only dialogue when you have a strong sense of identity. So I need to be profoundly Christian, profoundly scientist, and if I'm rooted in both traditions, then I can start something interesting really can come out of it. I wanted to make another point, but I forgot now. Sorry.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
sure.
Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Majdi Abdullah and I study here in Sofia philosophy, specifically Trinitarian ontology. And it's very interesting for me to see my both worlds like having dialogue. I come from a Catholic Christian family in Palestine in a Muslim life. I was able to live this interaction in daily basis in my school. So I studied Quran, I studied the Bible at the same time. It was always for me mesmerizing how we are not able to make connections like from our shared root, which leads to the one creator that loved the world. And love, I can give it like as following St. Thomas Aquinas, is willing the good of the other. Like God wills the good for the other, wills the good of the other for the other. He doesn't need us, but anyway, he created us and he loved us and willed our good. And my question would be, or will for future meetings, is to speak more about the more close uniter between the view of Christianity and Islam, which is Isa ibn Maryam, or Jesus Christ, al-Masih, because I think he is like the most uniting and sometimes dividing figure, and between the two religions, which is beautiful. We're walking in this road of dialogue through history, but I said I want to thank God, alhamdulillah, for these meetings that gives hope in those difficult times, not only for environment but also all over the world, specifically also where I come from in Palestine. People are suffering and also nature is suffering, but we must put human always, as also Antonio said, it's not about just environment. It's like an introduction that leads us to put human as the first goal of our care, because if we care about human, we will care eventually about environment, and if we don't care about our brothers and sisters, humanity, then nothing else matters. No, that's it. Thank you. This is just my sharing my heart with you.
Thank you.
I don't know if one of the of you have some reaction. Yeah, I was also thinking about this relationship between human beings, like in the middle of that pyramid that Professor Faris showed us also. How do we connect it, and also in terms of this integral ecology, like both the nature and the poor that Professor Puglisi said. I was also thinking about this aspect, how crucial it is in order also to make steps forward in a more, let's say, ecological way. Do you have some reaction, or we are about to close? Maybe last words, if you want to add something, as we are out of time almost.
Just for Majdi comment, I think it is very important to understand few things, because sometimes when we have discussion between religion, we are having, in my opinion, some assumptions which are not realistic. We have to understand definitely that there are differences and there are also shared values. But having differences doesn't mean that we cannot cooperate. This is the bottom line of the things, because all religion are directing to one big idea, which is goodness. Everybody's stressing on this: Christianity, Islam, Judaism, even Hinduism and Buddhism. Everybody's stressing on goodness. So let's cooperate on goodness. But this doesn't mean that we will not have differences on our views on few things. Like, for example, our views on the God, also the concept of God, also prophethood and this type of things. It's okay, no problem with this one. There's no issue here. As long as everybody respects the boundaries of each one, then there's no issue. But I think the alliance, if we can call it like this, the alliance that we need to go for is to work for goodness, joint goodness, that we all agree upon. And this goodness is not different among religion, by the way. It's not different at all. The goodness, everybody agree on the goodness. But we will disagree on few issues related to the creed, related to some other details, which is fine, no problem. There's no issue about this one. So continuous discussion is very important, and also identifying the grounds for goodness. If we are successful in putting grounds for goodness, I think there will be a big change in this world, the alliance among religion. But we need just to work hard on this one.
Very much.
Maybe, sorry, Professor Guib.
Okay,
Just-
maybe yes. Last but not least, please.
No, I don't. It cannot be a conclusion, but just I thank for the stimuli that this discussion gave to me. I was led again to think why, as an economist in economic theorizing economic discourse, there is no place for God. There have been attempts to introduce it, but I will say one word on a simpler point, that in the absence of a higher reference in economics, the individual has a very central role. But of course, the rationality of the individual is the rationality of one out of 8 billion people. And we well know that individual rationality leads us to disaster in many situations of social dilemma, let's say, but also environmental dilemma. So mine was just, I asked the floor just to thank and to confirm the importance of also basing our reasoning on a higher view, which is still quite hard to introduce in science, but the reference for us, the believer, is there, and the challenge is continuous.
Thank you, Benedetto. Antonio?
Very briefly, because we're out of time now, but just like to, I don't want to contradict myself now, but I think the objective of this conversation was not to make a case for religion at all costs, right? Because religions come with the problems as well as with the promises. So they promise us wisdom, but they have around the corner always people who take the opportunity really to push agendas or abuse. So what is important really is to keep alive in us the critical sense of the intellect and the other the side of the faith aspect. So they're never in contradiction. They must remain always alive together. And finally, when it comes to complex problems, human beings can never delegate just to one science. So again, ecology is a complex problem. It's not just a scientific problem. So it requires wisdom that can come from science as well as from the embedded wisdom in all the religious and indigenous population as well. So that would be my final remark.
Thank you very much. I think it's a good conclusion. Thank you for broadening our view. And I think this is also the profound sense of these meetings that we are having. I'm not sure when will be the next one, but I'm looking forward to it. And I thank the participation of all those who are online. Greetings from Professor Kalebaut, who unfortunately is undergoing a bit of health issues right now, so he couldn't conclude, but I'm sure that he was happy to meet you, at least for the first part of the program. Yeah, we greet you from Sofia. Thank you very much for both the speakers, and best wishes. Good night, good day, wherever you are in the world.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.